Good afternoon, everybody. We are digging into some really hot topics this week with our live coaching event, and I'm so excited to jump into it with you all. So if you joined us last week, you can find the replay in the Facebook group and it'll also be emailed to you as well. We started a mini series on how to qualify food, and there's so many different levels to do this. And I wanted to break it down into kind of bite-sized pieces for you guys week by week. And I think this is a great time to refresh our memories if this is something that maybe you've learned with me through nutrition coaching, or maybe we've touched upon it in your coaching sessions. So this is an opportunity for you to really get more of a full picture and get those little details that maybe we might have missed along the way. Or if you're completely new to this, then this is a great place to start learning. So today what we're going to be focusing on are red flag ingredients to avoid or to minimize. And these are really important because we want to be able to get comfortable and familiar with these ingredients, because the more we are able to do that, we're going to be able to spot them when we're reading labels. We're going to be able to ask questions and think critically when we are out to eat and ordering food, and really just taking more ownership, more agency over our experience and the results that we're seeing. Because if we are not looking into the ingredients to the level that we need to be, then we could be eating things blindly without really understanding and recognizing the effect that they're having on our energy, our body composition, our level of pain, ease of movement, quality of life, mental health, you name it. So it all boils down to understanding our ingredients. And so today we're going to talk about that. What I want to start with is on your own, of course. Do you know the answer to this question? This is a little quiz. Processed foods can be categorized as the following. Is it A, found in a box, bag, container, or package? B, nutrient deficient, calorie dense? C, high in refined sugar, salt, and low quality fat? D, artificially flavored? E, causes inflammation? Or F, all of the above? So think about what you think the answer would be. And the reason why I start with this multiple choice question is because processed food is going to be kind of the heart of today's conversation. Last time we focused in on some tips for how you can optimize your nutrition. Simply put, mostly whole foods, minimally processed foods. The more that we can get away from the processed foods, it really just sets us up for success, and it kind of naturally aligns with what your body already wants, already knows that it needs and appreciates. So hopefully you've had some time to think about this. I'll give it away. The answer is F. It is all of the above. So all of these different options, A through E, describe characteristics of what processed foods are. And if you have any questions about those specifically, let me know. We're going to touch on almost all of them in today's conversation. So with that, let's chat about the red flag ingredients, getting right into it. So many of these are probably some that you have, thought about before. They can be somewhat obvious on the outside, but what I want you to learn from this is just getting more detailed in the names and familiarize yourself with how to identify them. So first red flag ingredient that we want to minimize is added and artificial sugar. So this is our white sugar, our brown sugar, maple syrup, honey, sucralose, aspartame. So if you caught that, the last two are going to be artificial sugars. So that means that, right, they're not made with real sugar. They're made with chemical alternatives that are actually highly detrimental to our health. They are cancer causing. They're not natural, right? And so I put them, both the artificial and the real sugar, in here because they're both problematic. And I would even argue that the artificial sugars are more problematic than the real sugars, just because of all of the extra effects that they have on your body. Not only do they, they throw off your appetite, they are they can actually contribute to a lot of other mental anxieties. And it's just not a good road to go down when we start to try to switch from the real to the artificial sugars, because we tend to just have this backlash. We're either going to crave more of the natural sugars, we're going to lose our appetite for real sweetness, natural sweetness, and it's just not a good path to go down, like I mentioned. So it is important that we are really making an effort to minimize how much added sugar that we are eating. And it can be difficult, right? Because if you think about anything that you're getting in a box or a bag, those processed foods that we've now identified, almost everything is sweetened. And even the things that should not really be sweetened, like a savory sauce or, a savory cracker or something like that, they just add sugar to everything because it is more palatable, it makes it more tasty, it makes it more addictive. You're gonna wanna keep going with the potato chips, right? Or whatever's out of that bag or container. It just makes it more enjoyable. And it's like a drug, right? It's like you can't have a little bit, and when you have that taste of it, you just wanna keep going at it. And it can be really not so good for our health. We're gonna talk about why, because all of these kind of go into the same category when we talk about why we want to minimize them. So let's just keep going through the actual ingredients. Another thing I wanted to mention too with sugar is that you'll notice like maple syrup, honey, agave is not on here, but that would also count. A lot of times I get questions about, well, aren't those healthier? Aren't those more natural? The answer is yes, they are absolutely more natural, healthier alternatives than, say, a big pile of white refined sugar. But what I want you to keep in mind is at the end of the day, they still have sugar and they are added sugar. So you want to be very gentle and careful with how often you're eating it, and try not to use these different healthier or more natural sugars be a reason to continue to overeat with them. We can get into nitty gritties about like how many grams more or less of sugar, but you want to minimize it. Really, you want to try to keep your sugars as low as possible when possible, because if we can avoid it, we don't want that overload. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about why that matters. But just keep in mind, even the natural sweeteners, you can go crazy with them and they still are sugar. So with that, let's move into hydrogenated oils. So these are another sneaky killer because they're everywhere. When you eat out at a high fine dining restaurant or fast food, these restaurants are using these types of oils often. Canola, soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, peanut, corn oil. Okay. Not only are they highly used in these restaurants and places that we're going to be ordering food from regularly, eating out in, but of course, highly prevalent as well inside of your processed foods. Because why? Well, for two reasons. Number one, they have a really high and long shelf life. So they're going to stay good for a long time. And then they're also high smoke point oils, which means that when you're deep frying or cooking at high heats, that they hold their chemical compounds much better than, say, another oil that is not hydrogenated. A third reason why they're used so often is because they're very cheap. So these oils, many of them were actually processed and produced, especially like the soybean and canola, like back in the Industrial Revolution, and they were used to power machines. So think of that. And then it's evolved a little bit to get to our plates today. And that's scary because that can't be good for us, right? And we want to avoid these at all costs. These are sold just like any other oil in the grocery store, right? They're put right next to all of the other healthy oils. And it's really important that you are actively choosing something that is not these oils. And some of my favorite options, especially for high heat cooking, would be avocado oil, coconut oil, ghee. You can even use really high quality animal tallow and fat from animal that's rendered from, of course, a good quality source. One of my favorites is the Epic brand. They sell jars of animal tallow and like duck fat, things like that. Really flavorful, great for high smoke point cooking. and that'll set you up. I'll also add for the sugars, some of my favorite alternatives would be monk fruit sweetener and stevia. Those would be my top two because those actually don't have sugar. They are natural, but they do give you a great amount of sweetness. So that way you can, spice up and make your baked goods or, whatever you want to make sweet without the sugar spike. If you are going into more of the sugar route and want more natural option, coconut sugar, coconut nectar are my two favorites. It's a little bit lower on the glycemic load. So that way when you're eating it, you don't get the same effect as some of these sugars here. And it's also not a fake sugar, an artificial sugar. So you're in better shape with that as well. Those would be my two favorites. Moving on to pasteurized dairy. We have cow milk, cheese, yogurt, cream, butter. Red flag ingredient in this country, okay? Because these types of ingredients, by the time that they get to our plate and, when they get to the store, they are zapped so hard with, different types of chemical process and pasteurization processes that we ultimately lose all of the nutritional benefits from these foods from their original source. And then if we even look at the original source from the animal, right? A lot of times these animals that are producing our dairy products are not raised in sustainable, healthy practices, right? They are overfed, a fatty diet. They are, squished really tight without room to graze and be happy. So their living environments are not good. Their eating habits and their own environment is not healthy. So what does that mean? Well, the products that they produce are going to be a reflection of that. And we don't want to be eating that, right? Because that's going to have a consequence on our body. So that is basically, in a nutshell, why we want to avoid pasteurized dairy. If you went to a different country and they had, animals that were raised in a more healthy manner, healthier, leaner diet, that would be a different story. And your body most likely would totally react differently to those types of dairy. Another thing I want to mention too is that although, not to be a downer with our dairy in this country, there is hope because there is so many options these days where you can actually get raw dairy, or in other words, not pasteurized dairy, in the form of mostly like cheeses. I've seen milk even here in Miami. And while it's kind of like under the radar, you can still actually find many of these versions. And all that means is that the dairy was not zapped and processed. So that means that a lot of the good nutrients are still intact. And that can actually be really great for your gut biome, the bacteria that we actually need. Fermented foods are always something that I am encouraging you guys to eat more of because it's going to just set you up for immunity and a great stomach, good digestion, all of that. And you can find it. And of course, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't make it a raw dairy option if the animal wasn't taken good care of, right? Because then it would be unsafe to eat. So just some options there for you. One of my favorites are like some raw cheddars and raw manchegos. Those are delicious. And Parmesan typically tends to be tends to be raw as well. But you want to look for like the best quality. Parmigiano Reggiano, delicious. And just notice the difference in how you feel compared to maybe a pasteurized dairy, right? Now moving on to gluten, which I think we have all heard at this point is a red flag ingredient to minimize for very much the same reason with the dairy, how in this country we have issues with the cultivation of our gluten products, specifically the wheat plant, right? So flour-based products. What happens is when they're growing, they're sprayed heavily with a pesticide called glyphosate or something along the lines that's similar to that chemical, like Roundup is another it's another name for it essentially. And this is again a highly cancer causing ingredient. We don't want to be consuming so much of this. And again, a little bit is probably okay. But when we start to make a habit of eating these foods that are all sprayed with a lot of this glyphosate and they're infected with so many pesticides, it becomes an issue for our gut, becomes an issue for our mental health. It becomes an issue for our joints. And again, our pain, energy, you name it, because of what we're about to talk about after this, that it's just not worth eating it, or at the very least not having it so often. So keep in mind, I didn't write ingredients to eliminate, I said to minimize, because I understand that it's going to be nearly impossible to cut all of these out. And I don't think that's actually part of a healthy lifestyle for any of us. It's more about taking an intentional approach to take them out as often as possible or to reduce them. So with gluten, we have bread, pasta, dough, cookies, cereal, pastries, you name it, right? It's just everywhere. And again, this is one of those sneaky ingredients where even something that doesn't look like a piece of bread very well could have gluten in it. Think about things that are breaded, even sauces. You want to be super mindful of that. Processed soy and tofu. Okay, so again, we get very low quality versions of soy in this country. So things like soy milk, soy protein, soy sauce. It's just not a highly nutritious ingredient for us to be eating when there's so many other options too. So think about this, with all of these different processed foods, there are so many other healthier alternatives that are closer to whole foods with higher nutrient count, which means higher energy, which means more bang for every bite that we eat that comes back to us. And isn't that what we want, right? We want to maximize our experience here with life. And so if we're going to choose our food, let's choose wisely. So with soy, I would recommend against that as a regular part of your diet. And then finally, alcohol, any kind of alcohol we're talking about here, beer, wine, hard liquor, mixed drinks, cocktails, because at the end of the day, it just doesn't do our body much good. It's not really helping us out. And yes, there's, some talk about the antioxidant benefits of like red wine, right? So of course, there's going to be some wins here and there, but overall, alcohol can add a lot of complication to our general approach with eating healthy, right? Everything from the effects that it gives us, from the actual like toxins that we're getting as we drink it, our body doesn't like it. And we want to just be aware of that and be conscious when we are deciding to eat it. So let me know if you guys have any questions about that. I know that those are a lot of things to think about. I do want to mention going back to some alternatives, because I think it's important to give you guys something. If you're going to take something out, what are you going to replace it with so you can still enjoy your food? Pasteurized dairy, some of my favorite alternatives are nut milks, coconut milk, oat milks without the oil, of course. That would be for dairy, milk options. I would say the same for yogurts. If you're someone that really loves yogurt, and again, we love that fermented benefit. There's so many great coconut-based yogurts, nut milk-based yogurts, you name it. Those are great options. Just read the ingredient labels for added sugar, of course, and funky ingredients. I would also recommend, as an alternative for butter, think about just getting a higher quality butter, like maybe a grass-fed butter, or even a ghee, like I mentioned with the hydrogenated oils alternative. Great option. And then what else for pasteurized dairy, like cream cheeses and some of these other like fun dairy products that we're used to eating. There's so many other alternatives that are nut-based now, like Miyoko's is a great brand. I'm trying to think of what else. Forager is an amazing brand. They make an incredible sour cream that literally tastes like the real deal, but you don't have to worry about the dairy. So that's a great option. For gluten, some of my favorite alternatives, like for bread, I love unsweetened rice cakes. You can do so many things with that. You could even, find yourself, if you really love your bread, go find a local baker and see if you can get sourdough, the real good stuff where it's homemade. Perhaps they could, speak to where the grain was processed, and there's a chance maybe you can find one that is not from a typical conventional farm where it was sprayed with glyphosate. But if you're really going to go the bread route, one of my favorites is definitely to find a sprouted bread. 1 Degree Organics is great. Silver Farms, I think, is another one. And all of this can also be found in your Vitality approved brands document that you've been emailed, and it's also inside of this group in the file. So just go ahead and look that up, and a lot of these brands will be able to help you out. And then for pasta, there's so many options now. A brand called Jovial makes a grain and gluten-free pasta made out of cassava, actually, and I've tried it. It's amazing. They come in all different shapes, spaghetti, little macaronis. You can do your favorite pastas. Capello's is a great brand. They do nut-based crusts and different types of pasta. Amazing. I've tried it. So good. With a lot of your baked goods, I encourage you guys to get creative in the kitchen and experiment. I have my own e-cookbook that is specializing in desserts and sweets, and I show you exactly how to do it. So if you ever, if you're curious about that, go to my website, myrubysoul.com, and check that out there. And it's a great way to just create everything that you love, but in a healthier way without some of these problematic ingredients, right? And then for crackers, I really love nut seed crackers. Obviously, you're gonna hear me say a lot of this like nut based, but that's really to your benefit because nuts and a lot of these alternatives have such a higher energy and nutrition level that you would want to have more of them in your diet anyways. It's gonna make you feel fuller, more energized, more satisfied longer. And then cereals, there actually are some healthier cereals that they've come out with lately. I think my favorite one is called, I think it's by or an organic. I have to look it up for you guys, but there is a good one that I've tried, and it reminds me of like, you know, being a kid again and eating cereal. So just get creative. Go to the grocery store, get ready to explore, especially Whole Foods, Fresh Market, some of these grocery stores that have specialty items. You never know what they're going to come out with next, and hopefully they will continue to make a lot more healthy options for us. So I hope that helps. We're going to finish up with inflammation. This is why it matters to minimize, you know, so you might be asking yourself, well, why, you know, what's the point? What is all this going to do to me if I keep eating these ingredients? Well, it matters because inflammation, think of it as synonymous with stress. And we can deal with a little bit of it, but after a certain point, it becomes problematic for us and our goals and our progress. And so I always like to start with the fact that inflammation and that function of our body is actually normal. It's a healthy function of our body's defense mechanism to protect us, to help us feel better when it senses our body is in danger. So a normal example of inflammation would be like if you are out playing outside and you sprained your ankle. And I've had that happen to me before. And what happens? Typically, when your ankle is sprained, you get that inflammatory response of it literally getting puffy and swollen, and it might get red and it hurts. And what's happening is the body is rushing blood to that area because it's like there's a red flag, there's a fire, and the body knows about it, and it's trying to put out that fire by healing you with extra blood and attention, right? And then over time, it would subside and you would feel better. Your ankle would go back to normal. What becomes a problem then is when we go from normal to chronic inflammation. And many of us don't even know that we're inflamed, which is even scarier. It's like the secret killer. It's the foundation of a lot of these diseases that our whole country is facing, and the reason why our lifespan is decreasing over time, right? So when it becomes chronic, it's essentially our body is noticing multiple fires are going off in our body all the time, specifically through our lifestyle habits, right? We are inflicting this stress on our body through what we eat, how often we work out, the quality and quantity of sleep that we get, the ability for us to diffuse our stress. The body now sees this as stressors, as fires to put out in the body, very similar to like if we were to sprain an ankle, right? But they're like low level or lower grade. Some maybe not, right? Depends on you as a person and your level of health. But the body notices these different stressors, and now it's freaking out, and it needs to put out all of these fires, and it starts to be, you know, essentially just fatigued out from all of the work that it needs to do because it thinks that you are in constant stress. And over time, a level of stress that just doesn't go down, it's at the level that it is, and it just keeps rising and rising and rising. If we're not making changes, can lead to premature aging. Our cells are not turning over as often because the body is working so hard all the time. We can get heart disease, cancer, I've mentioned a couple different times from those ingredients that we looked at, autoimmune disease, hormone imbalance, diabetes, dementia, you name it. It's just not a pretty path to go down. And while again, inflammation can be helpful in some ways, and a little bit of it is actually good and unavoidable, we're not going to get rid of it all completely, but we definitely want to be aware and understand and get honest about how our habits can be contributing to this. The reason why I want to bring this up to you guys and bring it to your attention too is that, especially if you're here and you are looking to get strong, you want to get lean, lose some pounds, lose the fat to get into a healthy zone and to stay energized for the long term of your life, right? Optimize your lifespan. Just know that inflammation is the primary contributor of obesity, because when we are living in a constant state of this stress, this inflammation, it makes it so much more challenging to lose weight. And so that's why I encourage you to think about getting, minimizing your inflammation first before you start to be hard on your body and hard on yourself for why you're not feeling energized, why you're not losing weight fast enough, why you're not being able to put on muscle or keep the fat off. Because inflammation is like the first level. We need to target inflammation first before we can really start to expect different changes from our body, because it's like a filter on everything that's making it so much more hard. And so when we become less inflamed, when our body is in more of a happy balance, a happy zone, less inflammation, when we take these ingredients out, then what happens is we're able to have that natural buoyant energy. We can put muscle mass on with more ease, and we can burn fat faster. And isn't that what we want, right? We have a better quality of life. We feel better inside our bodies and out. And so it is important that we understand that. So how do we minimize it? Well, of course, with today's lesson, our focus is minimizing these red flag ingredients. Very simple, right? And I know it sounds, it sounds easy, but I know it's not that easy in practice, because these are so prevalent in our industry, right? Our food industry. But that is really how we're going to attack this, is to minimize them as much as possible, being very thoughtful and conscious when we do decide to eat them. And, we can always talk about more ways to get through that, right? But I've given you some things to think about today. And then, of course, your level of activity, which I know all of you guys are working out, and I'm so proud of you for doing that. But just know that that's so important, because as you become more sedentary and move less, that is also going to increase your susceptibility to become inflamed. And of course, stress and sleep is also an opportunity for us, right? Because the more we are sleeping quality, restful, deep sleep, that is our zone to recover, to repair, and to get strong again, right? From the day's work and set us up for the next day. And if we don't have enough of that, it stresses us out more, right? Our stress levels go up with less sleep. So again, it's just this cycle. If we can break the cycle, really great sleep, we're working out regularly, we're watching our nutrition, and we're consciously choosing ingredients, then you're on the right path. And I know that that's what you guys are doing. So I'm very excited to present this to you, and I hope this gets you thinking. I hope it excites you to make some healthy changes. If you saw any opportunities or you feel like there is room for improvement, I think we always can. What we're going to talk about next time is the specifics of reading labels. I wanted to keep that separate because I know today was going to be a lot, and then we will go from there. So thank you so much for joining me, guys. Please jot down your comments. If you haven't voted in the poll already, I would love to know what times are work best for you guys for these live trainings, so you can actually come here live. But I love to be here serving you guys, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Take care.